network webinar, Incentivize Your Program, a discussion on dollars for doers. I'm just going to give the audience a few more seconds to log in, and if you can hear me, please type into your question box, hello, or I'm excited to hear about dollars for doers, just so we know that everyone is able to see the screen and hear me. Okay, it looks like we are in good shape. So we'll give everyone a few more minutes. All right, so we've got a lot of people on the audience, and I'd like to start off by introducing our three speakers today. We are very fortunate to have Bea Boccalandro, president of VeraWorks and a faculty member at Boston College Center for Corporate Citizenship. She has been doing research and working in the employee volunteer space for a while now, and is going to give us a landscape of the Dollars for Doers space. We also have Katie Genowiak here from Medtronic and Michelle McConnell from Exelon. Both of them are going to talk about their Dollars for Doers programs, and specifically we'll be covering these areas after going over the landscape: launching, communications, evaluation and innovation, and successes and challenges. So I'd now like to turn it over to Bea.
Thank you, Megan. So what is a Dollars for Doers program? We're kind of lucky that the name tells you a little bit what it is, but essentially what we're talking about is any program where the employer provides a grant to nonprofit organizations, or it could be government, it could be other social sector organizations where employees volunteer. So anything that falls under that umbrella is what we're talking about here. So then, now that we know what it is, what are the customary practices around Dollars for Doers programs out there? So first, how common are they? We know from research done at the Boston College Center for Corporate Citizenship, funded by Bank of America, that roughly a quarter of Fortune 500 companies have Dollars for Doers programs. Some have individual, some have team. We also know kind of the basic structure of it varies a lot of the Dollars for Doers programs out there. So some companies require only 8 hours to volunteer to be able to draw down a grant for your nonprofit organizations, and other companies require up to 250. And this is just for, these stats are just for the individual. So really anything pretty much goes there. But the majority of programs require somewhere between 20 and 50 hours for an individual to volunteer in order to be eligible for the grant. The average is 39. Then, okay, so what size grants? The grants vary between 50 and 1,000, and the average is around 400. In terms of how many employees participate, participation really varies from anywhere from like close to 0% to 50% with this is all Fortune 500 data. And the average is about 6%. People often ask, well, why is that so low? And if you think about it, this isn't, not any volunteer would be eligible for this, because you would have to volunteer a certain number of hours typically for one nonprofit organization in order to be eligible. So it requires a certain intensity in the volunteering in order to do that. So I think that in part explains the 6%. So a lot of people ask me, well, is the Dollars for Doers program a good idea? And my answer is, well, that's like asking me, is a hammer a good idea? It depends what you use it for. So I think a Dollars for Doers program is a great tool to help you move your employee volunteer program in the direction you want to move it. And what I mean by that is that if you're trying to get more team volunteering out there, you can have the Dollars for Doers program do that. If you're trying to create more skills-based volunteering, you can have the Dollars for Doers incentivize skills-based volunteering or pro bono volunteering. If you're trying to get more board service in particular, you can have the Dollars for Doers incentivize that. If you're trying to have your employee volunteer program support your marketing aims, like for example, strengthen your brand, you can have your Dollars for Doers program do that. But in order to do that, in order to have your Dollars for Doers program really support the direction that you're trying to take your employee volunteer program, you almost always have to put a twist on it. So in other words, the standard X number of hours for an X size grant gets you, that standard wide open Dollars for Doers program often is not the best way to help move your program in the direction you want to move it in. So I would just look at what twist you can put on it so that it supports your goals. So for example, the first twist to think about doing is, let's say that your program, one of the objectives of your employee volunteer program is to align better with the brand and strengthen the brand. Well, U.S. Airways has their Dollars for Doers program is called Flights for 50 program. So instead of giving cash to the nonprofits, which is really brand neutral, a dollar is a dollar is a dollar, they give vouchers to the nonprofits. So you can see how this volunteer program would be much more connected to the brand and the product than just giving cash. So that's one idea of a twist. Maybe there's a way to give something other than cash in order to have it resonate more with the company and differentiate what you give the nonprofits versus every other company out there. The second twist to think about is making it a team program. So a lot of employee volunteer programs out there are trying to move in the direction of having middle managers use volunteering as a way to improve their cross-functional collaboration and really bring their divisions together to work more effectively in teams. So you can structure the Dollars for Doers program so that it supports that. And there's 3 examples here. I'll just go through them real quickly. Wells Fargo, they're all about housing, especially now, because of the whole mortgage issue out there. And so they will give a grant to teams of employees that work in that area. Dell's Team Building Match program is designed only for teams, so that's another example. The Verizon's Team Incentive Program matches funds, again, if it's teams of employees that are raising funds for a cause out there, like for a walkathon. Now, one of the, I don't have time to get into all the twists, but I think you understand that there are many ways to finesse the Dollars for Doers program so that it does more for you than just the standard one. But one that comes up here is actually also have it focused on a cause. So Wells Fargo does that here. So it helps incentivize employee volunteering in the direction of housing. So that's another thing you can do, is just have the Dollars for Doers, support children's causes or focus it that way. And then that helps move your employee volunteer program in that direction if that's what you wish. So just to close my little sort of overview of Dollars for Doers programs out there, I think it's a great tool. It's a good way to honor employee selection of causes. It's an effective way to, people don't often think about this, but if you have a Dollars for Doers program, you have a huge database of what it is employees are out there doing. And you can use that to, do outreach in the community. You can use that to just understand what's going on. So it's actually, I'm kind of a data nerd. Yes, I love it. If there's a database, I'm happy. So you actually generate great data here. Instead of having to go out there and survey employees, your Dollars for Doers data can help you with that. Again, it's a great tool, but I would think beyond just adopting just the basic, cash grant of X for X number of hours and adding a twist to it so that it even serves you better and it serves the nonprofits better. Just one last comment is that this is one of the places in employee volunteering that varies dramatically, in my experience, by culture. So don't be surprised if you're trying to globalize your program and Dollars for Doers doesn't really make sense to your European operations or your Latin American or your Asia Pac or anything like that. So it has a very strong cultural component. So just a heads up on that.
Thank you, Bea. Before we move to Katie's presentation telling us about Medtronic's program, I want to remind the audience that if you have any questions that come up during the presentation about what Bea just covered or Katie or Michelle's specific programs, type them into the question box and we will definitely get to them to you directly, or we'll wait and share them during the discussion section at the very end. So without further ado, Katie.
All right. Do you want to go to the next slide, Megan?
Okay.
So talking about launching, I just wanted to give a brief overview that I'll be looking at this through our lens of when we kind of had a relaunch. Prior to 2004, we did have an employee engagement program, and we also still had a Dollars for Doers, but 2004 marked the start of our brand of Mission in Motion, which encompasses all of our employee engagement, our community council structure, our international ambassador structure, and formalized matching programs for volunteerism, disaster relief, and education. This was also the time that we started our VolunteerMatch partnership, so I think it's a good lens to look at where we grew from there. So just a brief history. Our Time and Talent program at Medtronic dates back to 1998. Once again, the Mission in Motion launch was in 2004. And at that time, we launched our volunteer grant program called Time and Talent with 40 hours and a $500 grant. We changed this in 2005 after Hurricane Katrina. The need was great. The desire from employees was greater. And so we changed that down to 25 hours. And it's been that way ever since. In 2007, we went global with our program, and so we renamed it to Volunteer Grants. In landscape interviews, we realized that Time and Talent and Dollars for Doers didn't really resonate across languages, and so Volunteer Grants was much more straightforward in our hopes to implement internationally. Where we stand currently with the program, in 2009, 716 grants were given out, 457,953. And you'll see that this number varies from a straightforward 500, and I'll get into that in the following slide. So our parameters: required to be a 501c3. Exclusions are religious organizations, political and fraternal organizations. You'll note the asterisk by religious organizations. If they're non-sanctioned, so a soup kitchen, etc., those do count. You must complete your grant request within 6 months of the 25 hours completion. And there's an unlimited number of grants per individual, but each individual can give to one nonprofit per year. So you can have 3 different organizations, 25 hours each, that's fine. And our grants rest on the calendar year. We currently encourage logging hours on VolunteerMatch, but it's not a requirement, and that's something we are looking to change for 2010. So our evaluation strategies vary. With the launch of Mission in Motion, we kind of went through a 5-year plan. We had a launch, increase program awareness, rebrand and expand, and then empower and elevate. So we're kind of at the point in 2010 where we're reevaluating and seeing what programs kind of came to the front line, what can we do better, what can we do differently, those twists that Bea had mentioned earlier. We do a global bi-yearly survey of employees and where we ask about our specific programming, if they would access it, if it were different, etc. And we also look at readership and click-through data for our internal ads, which kind of gives a great perspective on how many people are interested but maybe not going the extra mile and what can we be doing differently. As far as innovation goes, we do have quite a few twists already, and we're looking to expand on some more coming up. Currently, we offer 25 hours, $500 grant, but we also offer an added incentive of a one-to-one match of employee donation up to $500. So that grant potential becomes $1,500 if the employee gave $500 and we then matched. We find that this allows for a lot more employee engagement in the efforts, and it kind of puts the ownership back on the employee as well of making their volunteerism go that much further. We currently have all our retirees eligible for volunteer grants, and this is a fantastic source of volunteers we found. We have an active retiree group, the VSP Club it's called here. We have over 200 members, and they do quarterly volunteer events that are planned by the retiree club, but then they also do their week-to-week volunteerism. And I think the point here to note is that when talking volunteer grants, you do have 25 hours to one specific organization, and retirees are such a great outlet for this because many of them do have their weekly volunteer event that they go to and depend on as part of their schedule. Our Medtronic Board of Directors are also eligible for volunteer grants, and sitting on boards is an eligible activity for volunteer grants as well. I already mentioned the name change from time and talent to more universally understood volunteer grants. The last point, our tracking incentives, is kind of a new point of interest for us. What are ways for us to capture even more data via VolunteerMatch and the resources that we have there to better understand, are people getting to maybe 15 hours? Are they doing 10 hours at many different organizations? Where can we take this program further? In the tracking incentives we've looked at are exploring swag incentives. If you hit 10 hours, perhaps giving out a water bottle, etc. Or more likely what we're going to take are the mini grant incentives. So if you hit under 25, doing a Your Cause gift card where they could then direct $20 to a certain nonprofit, etc. So these are all kind of in the think tank stage, but things we're looking to always improve. And I think that that point of innovation there as well is that it can't stay status quo if you're not expanding and you're not growing it. Our hope is that this continues to be a forefront program for us, and so we do continually evaluate it. I mentioned the communication briefly internally. We do have a full yearly communication plan, and while the launch is great and splashy, it's just as important to keep that in the forefront as well. We use Medtronic news articles. We have website representation on our internal Mission in Motion website, email reminders, a login ad for everyone who logs into the My Medtronic homepage, and electronic billboards. We have plasma screens in most of our locations worldwide, and we have ad screening there as well, just to keep it in the forefront of people's minds. I mentioned in the first slide Mission in Motion ambassadors, and this is a huge kind of grassroots outlet where we get our word out as well. It is a formalized structure comprised of all employee volunteers. So these are identified employee volunteers at each location who want to take it a step further and who truly want to be the ambassadors of our Mission in Motion brand, getting people involved, advocating for all the employee engagement resources, and kind of acting as a checkpoint to answer questions and filter requests through. We currently have ambassadors in 15 countries, and we have formalized U.S. community councils with further structure than just the ambassador as well. So, successes and challenges. I think the successes were outlined pretty well by Bea. It offers a wonderful solution to the quantity of employee asks for funds. Funding through the foundation, we have a lot of passionate employees, and it's really hard to get all those requests and have to say no. And so this is a wonderful outlet for them to become further involved and to get representation for what they've done. It engages employees actively in foundation philanthropy. It gives them a voice, and it gives them a choice of where we're directing our funds, which I think is very powerful because you do want to be part of your company, and to have an active voice in what we're doing further engages them. it advocates a commitment to volunteerism. I think that can probably go without saying, but is important to mention. Some challenges: there is no one-stop shop solution. You work with two different systems, and so as far as just the administrative side of things, I'd highly recommend having a dedicated program administrator, grants administrator, to be handling that. International expansion has been a huge challenge for us and a huge opportunity as well. How to do it the right way. As Bea mentioned, there's some cultural implications and differences around the program. What we found so far is that we've had a lot of difficulty, again, on the administrative side, with giving grants from the U.S. internationally. We currently, for our international program, offer grants to 6 different nonprofit organizations, but they cannot go directly to the nonprofit which the individual did their volunteer time with unless it was one of those 6 nonprofits. And so that's a huge challenge that we recognize, and is something we're hoping to alleviate in the future, but navigating that whole international scene and making sure we do it the right way. You know, putting a Band-Aid on a problem is not going to help it, and so we're actively engaging the employees and figuring out how do we do this right and how do we further expand our program internationally and get the participation internationally that we're looking for. The incentives surrounding tracking volunteer hours is another challenge and opportunity as well. It's balancing the how much swag, how much do you need to put out there, and what will get somebody to track their volunteer hours. That tracking is such a powerful tool on the VolunteerMatch, and talk about data. You can see so much from it. And so we're actively working on a way to link the systems at least through our application process, and so I'm hopeful there. Megan, if you want to turn to the last slide, please.
There we go.
Great, thanks. So my 4, 1, 2, 3 points of advice. First, make the process as transparent as possible. There is a lot of back-end turnaround that needs to be done here, and so from an employee perspective, it always is helpful to put out front for them the dates the grants will be processed, you know, where they stand within the process. A lot of background check needs to be done on the nonprofit organization to confirm the legitimacy of the hours, and so just making sure you're in contact with the employee and letting them know that whole process makes all the difference. Advocate. Keep it constantly communicated. Like I said, kickoffs are very valuable, but keeping it memorable is important as well, and making sure that it doesn't fall off the radar once it's launched. It does need to be recommunicated, and you're always getting a new employee base, so capturing those new employees as well is important. Consider where your grants are going. Are there opportunities to further engage through this? This is something that I think we've done a fair job of, but I think we could do a much better job of. Where are our commitments for our employees? And we've looked at it through a lens of kind of bucketing it through, is it community engagement? Is it health-focused? Is it arts-focused? And where can we kind of focus and highlight our volunteer efforts within the company to further engage employees who may just have a strong area of interest? Finally, recognition. Formally recognize volunteer grant recipients. And recognition is so important to volunteers. A volunteer is just that. They're doing it for free. They're doing it, in this case, for the incentive of the $500 perhaps, but recognizing them individually and letting them know that they've made a difference is a huge factor that, you know, is an easy step that may be overlooked at times. We offer our Momentum Awards, which is an international volunteerism award every year, where we further give a $1,000 grant to the recipient's nonprofit of choice. And it's just a way to highlight and elevate and show that the company gets it and that they understand the value of the volunteer. And to have the company backing there for an official award, I think, is a great recommendation as well. That's about all that I had to touch on.
Thank you, Katie. And to the audience, just to let you know, I'll be sending the slides after, so if you have any questions, all contact information will be there, as well as everything that we're covering. And please do save questions. You can send them in now, but we'll have a discussion time at the end of the webinar. So let's move to Michelle, who's going to talk about Exelon's program.
Thank you. Just a little background on Exelon. Exelon is an energy company that's based in Chicago, but also has offices in Philadelphia and service territory also in Texas. So we're spread out a little bit. We're not international, but spread out a little bit in the U.S. And we started an employee giving program. If you want to go to the next slide, Megan. We started an employee giving program in 2003 where we launched our matching gifts program. And that was followed by more formalizing our volunteer program. We rolled out VolunteerMatch to our employees in 2004 and then actually began our Energy for the Community program, which is what we call our volunteer program, in 2005. And in 2006, we started a program where we recognize employees who volunteer in the community by giving $100,000 worth of grants to those nonprofits for 12 different employees. And, you know, we recognized in doing that we were able to support employees who are out there and active in the community, but it's obviously a small portion of our employee base. So from there, and in tandem with the matching gift program, we wanted to have a Dollars for Doers program that would also allow employees who are active in the community to have a chance to support the organizations where they volunteer. So actually this is National Volunteer Week, which we launched that program for our company in 2007, and you can see just a couple of other initiatives that we're involved with there. If you want to go to the next slide, please. For the launch of Dollars for Doers, it's actually a new program for us. We launched in August of 2008, and again, it was to recognize employee volunteerism, and as has been said before, you know, really wanting to keep at the forefront. Employees come to us for different grant requests, and obviously our contributions department isn't able to honor all those requests, or they might be outside the strategy of what we're giving to. So this is an opportunity for us to support volunteer initiatives of our employees without going outside of our strategy with our corporate dollars. And again, it's building on our previous engagement programs, including Matching Gifts for Education, the United Way campaign, and the Volunteer Awards program. And for us, you know, launching this program, what was key is getting executive support behind it, and that's something I would, you know, when we're talking about recommendations, just making sure that you have executive support for this program. A lot of times you'll find that your executives are spending a lot of time volunteering at organizations and may not even be considering it as volunteer hours, such as, you know, board committees and different nonprofit assignments that they do on a regular basis, both for the company and individually. We use the Giving Station tool for employee access for the grant making. So our employees go into the Giving Station to request a grant, and we launched that again in 2008 as part of the Dollars for Doers program. And then when we first launched it, we had an incentive for the first 10 applicants to double their grant. So currently we give $250 per grant. Unless it's an environmental organization, we give $500. And so what we did for those first 10 applicants when we launched the program is $500 for regular grants and $1,000 for environmental organizations. So in terms of our guidelines, we require our employees to have a full year of service before they can apply for the Dollars for Doers grants. They are required to have 25 hours of volunteer service, and it is required that they log that into VolunteerMatch. And when we're going and approving the grants, we definitely check VolunteerMatch to make sure all those hours are logged before approving the grants. And again, the grant amounts are $250 for a regular grant or $500 for environmental organizations. And this is the $500 for environmental organizations goes back to that idea of tying it in with our strategy. We're trying to focus more dollars and more awareness into environmental causes, and so the $500 was an incentive for our employees to get more involved with environmental opportunities. Our employees can apply twice a year in the calendar year, and we do have a very wide range of eligible organizations. The exceptions are very similar to what Katie outlined in her presentation, so I won't go through this, but it's, you know, even like as she said with religious organizations, if there's a food bank or something tied to that, then that's what allows it to be eligible for the Dollars for Doers. And then in terms of communications, we do a lot of the similar things that the others have mentioned. We have an internet homepage where we promote it. We try to promote it in tandem with different times of the calendar that make sense, like a lot of people make year-end gifts to different organizations or year-end holiday kind of volunteer activities. So that's when we do a lot of reminders about make sure your hours are logged and make sure you apply for your grant before the end of the year. We include it with our onboarding materials for new hires because we found that especially with the applicants and new hires coming out freshly from college, they're really interested in this kind of program and they want to know about it. And then we just do ongoing communications with our employees throughout the year. We also do targeted communications. We have a number of people who apply for our Energy for the Community Volunteer Awards that I mentioned earlier. And so we can email them about this program because they've already got the hours logged. They've already got the incentive to get grants for their organizations. So this is a way for us to reach out to them if they did not win the award, or even if they did, to apply for a Dollars for Doers grant. And we also reach out through our VolunteerMatch database to communicate to people about the Dollars for Doers grant and just making it an integral part of our volunteer campaign. We also do a survey. We do it annually and for our volunteers, and we include questions about Dollars for Doers to see how aware they are of the program and if they're taking advantage of it. In terms of successes and challenges, again, this is relatively new for us, but we gave away $36,250 in 2009, and we were very happy with the participation that we had from employees. I would say some of the same challenges we faced that Katie mentioned in terms of the technology. We have two different databases, or two different systems, I should say, that we're using for the program. They go to one site to request the grant, and they go to another site to log their hours. And I think whenever there's administrative tasks involved, it takes an extra push to get people in line with that. And we all have enough, administrative tasks we're doing throughout the day. So just kind of helping to make it as user-friendly as possible, I would say that's a big challenge, is really to make it user-friendly and not just another administrative task that people are feeling like they're already overwhelmed with that kind of task. And then the ongoing communication and making sure that people are aware of the program. I really liked what Katie said about the transparency in terms of recommendations, and I found that that's really key to making this a successful program. We publish our schedule on the website of when, if you make a grant on X date, or you request a grant on X date, this is when it will be paid out approximately. And we used to give out our grants quarterly, and now this year, starting in 2010, we've moved to monthly distributions of our grants because there was a bit of a lag time where if an employee applied for a grant in January, the payout may not be till May. So we wanted to make the turnaround time a little quicker for people so that there wasn't such a lag time between the grant request and the actual grant. But as we tweak that system, there are issues that come up, and as employees communicate to us about different things that they notice with the system, we've really tried to address those and just to share with them as much as possible about what we're doing on the back end and with the system. There definitely needs to be a point of contact. That's something I recommend for questions, and because you will get a lot of questions, and people will need help, especially the first time they're doing it, requesting the grant. Especially if you're like us, we have a database, but not every organization is included in that database, so they have to do a little bit of legwork to get the 501c3 information and enter that into the system. And for people who aren't part of, a corporate contributions office, that may be a little intimidating. So just having someone who can just walk them through the process, I found to be very key. And then just to leverage the volunteer program with Dollars for Doers and vice versa. They're very interrelated, and as Bea, I think, said, this is a very valuable database of what your employees are active in, and can really help the volunteer program as well.
Thank you, Michelle and Katie and Bea. Let's open up the floor for some audience questions for any of the three speakers. specific to their program or something general about the area of Dollars for Doers.
So the first one is came in for B, talking about the 6% participation rate, which seems low. And the question is, do you think part of it is because companies specify what nonprofits or activities are eligible, or is it just?
No, I really don't, because very few of the Dollars for Doers programs are out there in the Fortune 500s actually are limiting, with the exception of religious and political. So, if a company is willing to open it up to religious, in particular, religious organizations or faith-based or whatever you want to call them, I would think that the numbers would probably go up pretty dramatically, because we know from research in volunteering in general that that is the biggest slice of the pie in terms of where people volunteer. But with that exception, I don't think it's so much because the causes are narrowed or the nonprofits.
Great, thank you. And then this one's both for Katie and Michelle. If you could just kind of give how many employees you have and what you think your participation rate is.
I'll go first. Medtronic has 38,000 employees, and it's about at 4% right now, I believe. More people are using it. What we're finding difficult is that you get the grant number, but then our small amount or a limited amount of employees using it more than once is what we're finding.
We have about 19,000 employees, and I think the percentage for us is definitely 3 to 4% right now, just because it is a newer program. A lot of people participate in the matching gifts program, and we're still getting people used to the Dollars for Doers, but it's I've definitely seen an increase in grant requests in the last quarter, I would say, but we still have a ways to go to grow the program.
Great, thank you. And then this one for Katie. Someone was curious who you use or how you vet the organizations for your Dollars for Doers program, and then sort of a tag on to that is kind of the thought process behind considering requiring that people track their hours in VolunteerMatch.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that one more time? Were you talking specifically as far as organizations go internationally or nationally?
Why don't we do both?
So we go through JK Group, and they kind of do all the back-end work as far as vetting the organizations for us, very turnkey. Internationally, we worked with our foundation counterparts on the ground in various countries to identify best practices and larger organizations and NGOs that we could go through as far as, so when we made those 6 organizations, we were getting as many people as possible and hitting as many avenues as possible. And could you give the follow-up question to that too? I didn't quite catch that.
Sure. The question was, you'd mentioned that you encourage people to track their hours in your VolunteerMatch site, but it sounded like you were considering actually requiring that, and kind of what the thought process behind that shift.
Yeah, sure. So the thought process, and I can't take credit for it because I got it through a VolunteerMatch client group brain dump actually, was exploring, it's a very simple idea, the possibility of including on our actual form a checkbox and a checkpoint for have you logged these hours on VolunteerMatch, and then with a caveat of if you have not yet done this step, please go to your VolunteerMatch account and with the steps to log there. Kind of making a perceived checkpoint that needs to be done in order for the grant to go through, and in which case it'll kind of merge the two systems together without actually merging.
Great, thank you. This one's for Bea, back around the 6%. Curious if you think or have seen that companies that kind of have twists to their programs might see a higher percentage.
I have no hard data on that. Yeah, I got nothing. But if anybody else has a thought on that, go ahead and write it in lieu of a question, and we'll air it.
Great. And then also for Bea, what advice would you give for someone considering starting a Dollars for Doers program?
Okay, I would, first of all, I would remember that it's a lot harder to get rid of something once you've started it than it is to not offer it in the first place. So, again, I'm a real fan of tailoring the Dollars for Doers program to where your volunteer program wants to go. So if there's a big push for, board service, then I would not hesitate to just launch the program just around board service. You can always, it's very easy to expand it. It's very hard to contract it, because then you're saying no to somebody who has gotten used to it. So, and along those lines, if you're taking my advice to heart and you're going to do something that's a little bit different than what's out there and you're not sure how it will play, I love campaigns where you just say, in 2010, we are doing a campaign around obesity, and if you are part of this, if you participate in this campaign, there will be a volunteer grant component. But the campaign is for 2010, and December 31st, the campaign ends, and then you can always extend the campaign or make it permanent, but it gives you a chance to try something out. So I think just both of those things. I would, you're doing the right thing. You've come to a great resource in terms of what other companies are doing and listing what's going on. So I would just listen to what's going on out there. But then, I guess my final point, and I know I keep, this is similar to the other ones, but don't feel that, because 80% of the companies aren't doing it, or 80% are doing this, that, that you need to just match what else is going on out there. I would, I wouldn't be afraid to make it your own, I guess.
Great, thank you. A question for Michelle at Exelon. What practices, or more specifically communications, worked well for your launch?
Well, I think for us with the launch, it was really key to have, as I mentioned before, the executive support behind us, and to have our leadership help communicate the message, to the degree that you can have them communicate in staff meetings. Like, we actually attended some of their staff meetings and presented so that the information could cascade down to their employees. We asked them to invite us to their staff meetings so that we could also present, at their individual staff meetings, department meetings. Sometimes that works just as well or better as, the blast email communication, because sometimes people tend to ignore those. So I would say that was some of the best PR for us, was where we actually got to go to the meetings and make presentations, and then you can have fun pictures of people volunteering and just kind of really emphasize the great aspects of the program and how it ties into the overall volunteer strategy for the program and the corporate giving strategy for the program. And then, the other thing, I think it is helpful to have incentives and to have ways to kick off the program where people might get an extra little swag or extra dollars for their organization. Anything you can do to kind of make it a little more fun too, in terms of the launch, is really key. And off the top of my head, those are the things that I recommend.
Thank you. And a quick follow-up to that is any ideas on specifically reaching out to employees that may not be in front of a computer all day?
That's an excellent question, because I'm sure a lot of people deal with that. We definitely have that issue because we have people who are reading electric meters and working electrical lines who are out in the field, and they're obviously not in front of a computer. So that's where the staff meetings for us is really key. Going to a supervisor staff meeting and they have usually a safety roll call or some kind of thing that they do to kick off their, maybe not every day, but weekly or something like that. So to get into those meetings is really key, because you can post posters and you can post flyers, and that's helpful, but if people aren't in the office and they're not in front of their computer, you've got to find another way to actually see them, probably in person, to deliver the message to the degree that you can.
Great, thank you. This one's for Katie at Medtronic. Are there specific caps on the giving amounts you have for individual employees or based on organization?
Nope. So for the match, we cap it at $500. So each individual grant potential is $1,000 from the foundation, and that would be if the individual contributed $500 of their own money. But as far as if, say, 20 individuals each volunteer 25 hours for the local soup bank, that would be fine. We would not cap that at all. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. And then this one is for anyone. Do you, or maybe too, have you seen that people include retirees in their programs?
Yeah, a lot of companies do, and I think that's a great idea. If that makes sense with your overall plan, your volunteer program.
And as mentioned, we do have a very active retiree club, and we do include them in on our volunteer grants as well.
This time Exelon does not include our retiree groups. That's something we've considered. It's such a large base. I think that's part of the issue is we have a certain amount of money that we've allocated for this program. But I think it is something we plan to look into.
Katie, to follow up on that, do you see your retirees more involved than your current employees?
No, I wouldn't say so. I would say the amount of the retirees that are involved are very, very heavily involved, and this is something of importance to them because I guess just the nature of the employee base we have many retirees who were with the company, 40 plus years and are still very connected to the Medtronic mission and are very passionate about it. So including them and making sure they're still an active part of our employee volunteerism program is an important piece as far as our relations with them, but also as far as what they can act as an ambassador in our community for Medtronic. But I wouldn't say that the majority at all are retirees.
Great, thank you. A quick question for each of you. How many staff are managing the Dollars for Doers program within your company?
So this is Katie from Medtronic, and we have two, myself and then the grants administrator.
This is Michelle. I manage the Dollars for Doers program, so it's only one person, but I do get input and support from my supervisor, who's the Director of Corporate Relations.
Great, thank you. And then also for each of you, there's several questions just on how you go about vetting the hours and or the organizations. So maybe, Katie, if you could start with how Medtronic handles that.
Sure. And again, I kind of have to put that off on JK Group does that all for us. They do all of the processing of vetting and of substantiating the hours. And so if there's one-off issues, then our grants administrator follows up. But it's pretty turnkey and already done.
We have a oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, how about you, Michelle?
We have a similar relationship. We have Truist as our vendor, and they do the vetting for us on the back end. And was there a second part of that question?
Nope, just vetting the hours and or the organizations.
Oh, the hours, that's what I was going to comment on. In terms of the hours, I just manually go into a VolunteerMatch and check the employees' hours to make sure it matches with what they're saying for their grant request.
Great, and then one more just came in for Bea. How would you suggest a company set the incentives or grant amounts?
I think, probably if you're going to require a whole bunch of hours, then probably the grant should be larger. I mean, that makes more sense. So I think part of it is, the Dollars for Doers program it's a communications program because you're putting information out there and then employees are going to provide information to you. So if you want to cover a large base of employees, and get an idea of what a lot of employees are doing, you might want to set the threshold low. So, just require 10 hours and, make the grant on the low side. If on the other hand, what is more important to you is to promote not episodic volunteering, but longer-term volunteering with the same organization, a bigger commitment to one organization, then you might want to require 250 hours and, make the grant 1,000 or 2,000 or something like that. So again, I think it depends on what the goals, where you want to take things. The one thing I'll know is that we know from research that the number of hours, the amount of the grant does not, let's see, how do I say this? The difference in the amount of the grant doesn't generate a difference in how often people use it. So it turns out that you would think that if your grant is $200, you're going to get fewer people for the same number of hours, fewer people participating than if the grant is $500, and actually there's no evidence of that. So I think, yeah.
Great, thank you.
Well, wonderful. We had a good discussion, and I want to thank Bea, Michelle, and Katie again for joining us for this webinar. For the audience members, check back in for the next webinars coming up in May and June. We have speakers from the strategy and consulting firm BBMG, as well as Andy Goodman from the Goodman Center, talking about the impact of good storytelling. So the presentation will be sent to you after we finish this webinar, and it'll also be posted online, and you can also download the recording. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.